The family barbecue at my parents' house was in full swing when Uncle Tom asked the question that always made me cringe. "So Maya, what are you up to these days? Still doing that computer thing?" Before I could answer, Dad jumped in with his usual explanation. "Maya's working for some tech startup. You know how it is with these kids and their apps." "Actually, I run my own software company," I corrected, but Dad was already moving on. "She's always been the broke one in the family," he continued, addressing the circle of relatives gathered around the grill. "Lives in that tiny apartment, drives that old Honda. Not like her brother Alex with his law practice or her sister Jennifer with the medical practice." Alex, perfectly dressed in his polo shirt and khakis, nodded knowingly. "Maya's always been more artistic. Creative types don't usually focus on money." "That's not a bad thing," Jennifer added with the condescending tone she'd perfected in medical school. "Someone has to do the creative work even if it doesn't pay well." I stood there holding my beer, wearing jeans and a t-shirt among their business casual attire, listening to my family discuss my financial situation as if I weren't there. "What exactly does your company do?" Aunt Linda asked with polite interest. "We develop enterprise resource planning software for manufacturing and distribution companies," I explained. The glazed looks told me they had no idea what that meant. "Sounds complicated," Mom said. "Is it stable work? You know, with benefits and everything?" "It's my company, Mom. I provide the benefits." "Oh, that's nice, dear. Maybe someday you'll be able to afford a real office instead of working from home." I actually had a 15,000 square foot headquarters in the tech district, but explaining that would require explaining the rest of my business, which my family had shown zero interest in understanding. Dad flipped burgers and continued his narrative. "Maya's always marched to her own drummer. While Alex and Jennifer were focused on traditional careers, she was off playing with computers. Playing with computers had built me a $50 million company, but I'd learned not to correct Dad's stories. My family had decided I was the eccentric underachiever, and evidence to the contrary only confused them. "Maybe she'll meet a nice man who can provide for her," Grandma suggested helpfully. "A lawyer or a doctor like her siblings found." Alex's wife Sarah nodded approvingly. "Financial security is so important in a marriage. Maya, you should really consider dating someone established." The conversation moved on to Alex's latest case and Jennifer's promotion to department head. Their accomplishments were discussed in detail, with proud parental commentary and specific salary figures mentioned casually. When the topic circled back to me, it was to discuss my potential and what I might do to get my life on track. "There are some excellent MBA programs," Dad suggested. "Might help you transition into more traditional business. Or you could use your computer skills in a corporate environment," Mom added. "I'm sure someone would hire you." After dinner, as I helped clean up, I overheard Dad talking to his business partner Robert, who'd stopped by for dessert. "Maya's struggling a bit," Dad was saying. "Living paycheck to paycheck, you know how it is with these startup people. No stability." "That's too bad," Robert replied. "Maybe we could throw some consulting work her way. Our company's looking to upgrade our computer systems. I'll ask her, but honestly, I don't think she has experience with real business software. Her stuff is more hobbyist level." My hobbyist level software was currently being used by over 200 manufacturing companies across 12 countries, but Dad saw my modest lifestyle and assumed financial struggle. The truth was more complicated than my family would ever understand. The build-up. What my family didn't know was that I'd deliberately kept my success quiet. 5 years ago, I'd learned the hard way what happened when people knew you had money. Friends became investment opportunities. Family members became financial advisors. Every interaction carried the weight of wealth differential. So when Apex Industries started generating serious revenue, I'd made a conscious choice to live modestly. I kept my small apartment, drove my reliable Honda, and dressed like any other programmer. I paid myself a modest salary and reinvested everything else into growing the company. My family interpreted this as financial struggle, which I'd initially found amusing and eventually accepted as protective camouflage. But lately their constant commentary was wearing thin. Every family gathering included concerned discussions about my situation and helpful suggestions for improving my prospects. They'd appointed themselves my financial advisors while having no idea what they were advising about. 3 months ago, I'd started exploring acquisition opportunities in the manufacturing sector. My ERP software gave me unprecedented insight into industry operations, and I'd identified several companies that were struggling with outdated systems and inefficient processes. Dad's company, Precision Manufacturing, was at the top of my list. For 25 years, Dad had built a mid-sized operation producing specialized components for automotive and aerospace industries. He employed 150 people and generated about $30 million in annual revenue. He was proud of his success and frequently reminded the family that he'd built his business the old-fashioned way, with hard work and determination. What Dad didn't know was that his industry was consolidating rapidly. Larger players were acquiring smaller manufacturers to achieve economies of scale and technological integration. Companies like his were either going to be acquired or forced out of business within the next few years. My company had the capital and strategic vision to not just acquire individual manufacturers, but to buy enough of them to control entire supply chains. We could integrate their operations with our software, eliminate redundancies, and create a manufacturing network that would dominate the market. The plan had been in development for 8 months. We'd already acquired 6 companies in the sector and were positioned to buy 12 more, including several of Dad's major competitors. The final piece of the strategy was acquiring the mid-tier companies like Precision Manufacturing. Once we controlled enough of the market, we could set prices, dictate terms, and essentially own the entire automotive component supply chain. Dad had no idea his industry was about to change forever. He also had no idea his underachieving daughter was the one changing it. Last week, my business development team had presented me with the final acquisition targets. Precision Manufacturing was included in the package, along with 15 other companies that would give us controlling market share. The total acquisition cost is $847 million, my CFO had explained. But the strategic value is worth twice that. Once we control these companies, we'll have near monopoly power in the automotive component sector. I'd approved the acquisitions that morning. Tonight, Dad was telling relatives that I was broke. The revelation. The call came during dessert on Sunday afternoon. We were still at my parents' house, the extended family finishing coffee and discussing weekend plans. Dad was in the middle of explaining to Uncle Tom why I should consider getting into sales, when his phone rang. "Excuse me," he said, stepping away from the table. "It's Robert." The conversation started quietly, but Dad's voice grew louder as he moved toward the kitchen. "What do you mean acquired? Acquired by who?" The entire family went quiet, trying to listen. "Apex Industries? I've never heard of them. How can they acquire our whole sector?" Alex and Jennifer exchanged concerned glances. I continued eating my pie. 15 companies? In one day? That's impossible. Dad's voice was rising, a mixture of confusion and panic. "What do you mean we're part of the deal? We're not for sale." The family dinner had completely stopped. Everyone was listening to Dad's increasingly frantic phone conversation. "They can't just buy our suppliers and customers. That's. Robert was apparently explaining the details of the acquisition strategy. I could hear Dad's responses getting more desperate. "So if they control our supply chain, they basically control us? How is that legal?" Mom looked terrified. "What's happening? Is the business in trouble?" Dad held up a finger, still on the phone. "Robert, slow down. You're saying this Apex Industries owns our suppliers and our biggest customers?" "As of today." "Effectively, yes," came Robert's voice through the speaker, loud enough for everyone to hear. "They've bought the entire vertical integration chain. We're surrounded." "But who are they? Where did they come from? How did we not see this coming?" "Nobody saw it coming, Jim. It's the biggest acquisition in manufacturing history. Happened overnight." Dad sank into a kitchen chair, still holding the phone. "So what does this mean for us?" "It means we're going to get an acquisition offer we can't refuse. If we don't sell, they'll cut off our suppliers and customers. We'll be out of business in 6 months." The kitchen was silent except for Robert's voice explaining the strategic implications of vertical integration and market control. "Jim, you need to understand, whoever planned this is brilliant. They didn't just buy companies randomly. They bought exactly the right combination to control the entire industry." Dad looked shell-shocked. "How much do you think they'll offer?" "Hard to say. Maybe 50, 60 million for your operation." But Jim, you won't have a choice. It's sell or die. That's when Dad noticed the entire family gathered in the kitchen doorway, listening to every word. Robert, I'll call you back. He hung up and looked around at our concerned faces. The business. There's been some kind of corporate takeover. A company called Apex Industries bought most of our industry today. What does that mean? Mom asked. It means. Dad struggled to explain. It means we might have to sell the company. Alex stepped forward in lawyer mode. Dad, you should consult with legal counsel before making any decisions. This sounds like it could be anti-competitive. It's perfectly legal, I said quietly. Everyone turned to look at me. Vertical integration acquisitions are standard corporate strategy, I continued. If they bought suppliers and customers simultaneously, they've created a controlled market environment. Your company becomes non-viable as an independent entity. Dad stared at me. How do you know about this stuff? Because, I said, setting down my coffee cup, I'm the CEO of Apex Industries. The silence that followed was absolute. Dad's mouth opened and closed without sound. Alex looked like he'd been hit with a brick. Jennifer grabbed the counter for support. That's impossible, Mom whispered. I pulled out my phone and opened the news app. The headline read, Apex Industries completes $847 million manufacturing acquisition spree. There's my picture, I said, showing them the photo of me at this morning's press conference announcing the acquisitions. Dad took the phone with shaking hands and read the article. Maya Chen, CEO of Apex Industries, announced the completion of 16 strategic acquisitions that will give the company controlling market share in automotive component manufacturing. He looked up at me. You're Maya Chen, CEO? I'm your daughter Maya, who you just told the whole family is broke. But your apartment, your car, are exactly what I choose to drive and where I choose to live. I prefer to reinvest in business growth rather than personal luxury. Alex found his voice first. How much is your company worth? The acquisitions today were valued at $847 million. That's just this quarter's expansion budget. Jennifer sat down heavily. This quarter's budget? Apex Industries is valued at approximately $2.3 billion, I said calmly. I own controlling interest. Dad was still staring at the phone. You bought my industry? I bought the companies that made strategic sense for vertical integration. Your company happened to be in the target sector. So you knew this was going to happen? When I was talking about the business, asking for advice about expansion, worried about competition, you knew you were going to buy out our entire market. Yes. And you said nothing? You never asked what my company did. When I tried to explain enterprise resource planning software, you glazed over. When I mentioned working with manufacturing companies, you assumed I meant small-scale consulting. Mom looked like she was in shock. Maya, are you saying you're rich? I'm saying I'm successful. The money is a byproduct of building something valuable. Dad stood up slowly, the reality sinking in. So when you were sitting here listening to us talk about your financial struggles, offering career advice, suggesting you find a husband to support you, I was listening to my family discuss my life without knowing anything about it. But why didn't you tell us? Because, I said, looking around at their shocked faces, I wanted to see if you valued me for who I am or what I own. Now I know. The aftermath. The next few hours were surreal. Dad called Robert back to inform him that his daughter was the CEO of the company acquiring their industry. Robert initially thought it was a joke, then asked if Dad could arrange a meeting to discuss preferential acquisition terms. Alex immediately shifted into business mode, offering to handle the legal aspects of the sale and suggesting we could keep it in the family with favorable pricing. Jennifer started asking about investment opportunities in my company. Mom kept walking around the house muttering, "My daughter is a billionaire," under her breath. The family dynamic changed instantly and completely. Suddenly, my opinions on everything became valuable. My modest lifestyle was reframed as brilliant wealth management. My decision to stay single became smart focus on business growth. I always knew you were special, Mom said, which was particularly ironic given that she'd spent dinner suggesting I needed to find a man to support me. You could have told us, Dad said, but his tone was different now. Respectful. Almost deferential. Would it have changed how you treated me? Of course not. You're our daughter. But you just spent 3 hours explaining to relatives why I'm the family failure. You offered me consulting work because you thought I needed money. You suggested I get an MBA to transition into real business. The room went quiet. You're right, Dad admitted. We made assumptions. 2 weeks later, Precision Manufacturing received an acquisition offer of $75 million, significantly above market value. Dad accepted immediately, knowing he had no other choice. At the signing, he pulled me aside. Maya, about the offer amount. It's more than the company is worth. It's exactly what the company is worth to my strategic plan. But you could have offered less. We both know I had to sell. I could have. But you're my father, and despite everything, I want you to be proud of what you built. Dad's eyes filled with tears. I am proud of you. I'm sorry it took this long to understand what you'd accomplished. The family relationships slowly rebuilt themselves, but on different terms. They treated me with respect now, but I knew it was largely because of my net worth rather than any fundamental change in values. I kept my modest apartment and old Honda, partly because I genuinely preferred them, and partly because they served as a constant reminder of who my family thought I was when they believed I had nothing. Dad used his acquisition windfall to retire early and travel with Mom. Alex referred several clients to my legal team and started specializing in corporate acquisitions. Jennifer invested in biotech startups and asked for business advice. The woman they'd called the broke one now employed over 3,000 people across 4 countries and controlled a significant portion of the global automotive supply chain. But more importantly, I'd learned that success wasn't just about building wealth. It was about understanding who really knew your worth, regardless of what you owned. And sometimes, the most valuable lesson was discovering that the family who thought you needed their financial advice was actually dependent on your success for their future.